Namaste. Sri Aurobindo describes the Indian culture as a vast cathedral in which still, though the cathedral is, now some places you see there is something which is broken, another place something is being built up, yet still the worship is offered to the unseen, eternal. So, what really this cathedral is, we can take a little example of Savitri Bhavan, because Indian culture and its foundations are, it includes, it's like a vast compendium of the absolute. It's not just one little truth, one little book, one little finding, one little discovery. It takes into account the entire totality of human existence and what is beyond it. So let me start with the example of Savitri Bhavan. So if somebody asks, what is Savitri Bhavan? Well, you may describe the entire geography of the Savitri Bhavan, all the buildings inside it, and each of it is Savitri Bhavan. And yet, there is something as Savitri Bhavan which escapes this entire totality of structure and superstructure. Because as far as the physical body is concerned, new structures may yet come up, and maybe old structures may undergo modification. But Savitri Bhavan is the spirit of Savitri Bhavan, what has gone inside it as an idea. But if we go still further, the idea of Savitri Bhavan has its foundations in the spirit of Auroville. And if we go still deeper, the spirit of Auroville comes from the Divine Mother. And if we go still further, we'll see that the Divine Mother is the manifestation, the incarnation, the advent of the Supreme Shakti. So when Indian thought penetrated things deeper and deeper, first to find the foundation. And they made many bold, interesting declarations, which we'll speak about. But first we must understand that it was built on the solid ground or solid foundation of Ekameva Dvitiyam, there is but one reality without a second. This is one of the most important discoveries, and this is important because the other day I was listening to there's roadside philosophies, and somebody was raising this question, what is Bhartiyata? Tell me, what is the dress of a Bhartiya? What is the food habit of a Bhartiya? So obviously this is the most external way of trying to understand. It's true, we don't have one dress, one food culture, we don't have one marker, but that is the strength. But one thing is there at the foundation of what can be called as Indianness or Bhartiyata, that there is one reality without a second. This is what made Indian thought so vast and Catholic. And to complement it, it also said there is one without a second, but the wise give it different names. Ekam Sad Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Now this is a complementary thing, because when many religions say there is one reality, many cultures would say that. But in the mind it gets translated into there is one God, but that is my God. Or that is my conception of God. Or that is my guru, my prophet, my whoever. But Indian thought had the boldness to declare there is one reality. The wise call it by different names, and then it went on further. There are multiple approaches through which we can arrive at this one reality. So this immediately you see the foundation of this wonderful something which we call as Indian culture. This is not a thought, this is not a conception, but it's based on the experience and realizations of the Rishi. That's why people often ask about India. What is India? And it's so beautiful. If you go back, recently someone was asking me, that nation is born only 200, 300 years back. So what is the reality of the nation? Well, in India, it was not used, the word nation was not used. Initially we see India is formed as a spiritual reality. So we have the story of Sati, where all the 51 parts of Sati are scattered all over the... If you draw them together, you have the map. Then you have a geographical way of understanding Ganga, Yamuna, Kaveri. So right from the beginning, from the Himalayas, there is a beautiful sloka which describes the geography of India. Meaning thereby the geography is not just a land mass, but a living reality. And then slowly and slowly we come to what really is an Indian, who is an Indian. So an Indian is, in ancient times, there were no passports, people could travel across the borders. But the sense of Bharatiyata, even before the name Bharat came, it was called Aryavarta. So it was the land of the Aryas. And of course, we know the whole history, and I am not going into it, how it got distorted into people who invaded from further north. But all that has been debunked thoroughly, genetically, geographically, archaeologically. So I am not going into it, it's a separate subject. There was nothing like an Aryan invasion. It was a myth created only to create a divide within India and to justify that, well, Aryans had invaded, so we have also invaded. So what's the big deal? But Aryan was a psychological type. So at third level, they said, who is really an Indian? What is the true identity? They didn't have the word Indian. So he was an Aryan, a psychological type of humanity, who was, as I was just mentioning, we are all farmers, who was a farmer because he was tilling the soil of his nature to bring out the harvest of plenty. Out of what? Out of the divine seed which is sown within this very body, this Kshetra. And the Aryan was also a warrior because he was fighting all that is dark, all that is obscure, all that is false. He's a warrior. He doesn't accept, things which are perverse, things which are right, because he wants this world to grow beautiful. See, people often say, what is there? Let live, everything is all okay. But for the Aryan, this world is sacred. He wants beauty to manifest. So wherever there is ugliness, whether it is in his own thoughts and feelings, first of all this, so that's how he becomes a Swarat. He must conquer it. He must remove it. Wherever there is smallness, there are such beautiful verses in the Upanishad. And one of them in the Isha Upanishad, he says, O Agni, you who makes the crooked straight. He doesn't accept crookedness, tube, deception. And that whole side was called as Anarya. There is an Aryan way of life where you live for beauty, for truth, for light, for harmony based on truth, for the greater sense of unity where there is no one way of living but many ways, but all of them leading towards a great consummation. So this was the Aryan type, which was a psychological type. So we see several layers through which India was being formed. Because all creation starts from above and then goes downwards, like the Ashwath tree. That's how Indian thought conceived creation. The geographical or the political unit came much later. There is no doubt about it. But that's the way things should be formed. Not that we have a house. Just imagine if Savitri Bhavan, somebody said, we should have something here very nice, built a very multi-storied house, and they said, what should we do? Okay, let's have Savitri Bhavan. Now that's not how things should be. So it starts with a conception of the world, and that conception is that it's very beautiful. One of the boldest conceptions based on experience, that this world is not a chance, not an accident, not a random phenomena. There is within it a divinity which is immanent in every particle of existence. So God dwells within it. Doesn't matter what we call, God. By God we can say the perfection. And because that perfection, that divine state, that divine origin is there within it, therefore this world is meant to manifest the divine who is within. So not only is the divine present in each particle of existence, there is something called as the manifestation of the divine, which is an ongoing process. That's what is called as Leela. So Leela is simply that it is a progressive manifestation of the divine which is happening in this universe. So this world is, as Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, God fulfilled in outwardness. So therefore they saw in this vast galaxy also God, Virat. They saw in the inner world teeming with thoughts and feelings and impulses also God, Hiranyagarbha. And there was something beyond, Pragya. So all these are different ways. So God was not just cut off out there up in heaven, but God who is immanent in each particle of creation. But then it also made a second conception that all that is happening within the universe, not only the divine is within it, it is surrounded by the divine. Now this may sound, it's okay, a very nice thought that everything is surrounded by the divine. But it makes something very interesting, that if the circle and circumference of this creation, not only its core, but also the circumference is the divine, meaning thereby that whichever path human beings will take, eventually they will end up with the divine. How it will happen? That's the mystery. So the Vedas describe this world as Diti surrounded by Aditi, darkness surrounded by light. So that's why, it answers one of the problems of physics, if people call it a problem, in what is space expanding. So it can be understood if we say that there is a finite surrounded by infinite. Then it's okay, there is an infinite into which it can expand. It can expand endlessly. Or it can begin to contract. So that's where we had a conception of the finite surrounded by the infinite. So this is how they conceived. And as I say, it's not a conception based on experience. And they made a third wonderful truth or revelation. First is God is in all, meaning thereby none of us is condemned forever. We are not damned into some dark state. All of us, regardless, the wicked, the evil doer, all of them ultimately have a divine destiny. Why? Because the divine is hidden inside. This clay, this dust, this grain of sand has a divine destiny. Because divine is hidden inside. This material body, corporeal body, has a divine destiny because divine is hidden inside. And as I said, any which way we go, up, down, which was called in the Vedic lore as the northern path, Uttarayan, and the southern path, Dakshinayan. It got, of course we use these terms in a different way, the winter and the summer solstice from 22nd December. But Uttarayan meant the upward path of ascension. It has nothing to do with north and south, but upward path of ascension. But equally, if you take the Dakshinayan, the downward path of gravitation, eventually you will hit the infinite. That's how we see in Indian fables that whichever path, even the greatest of Asura, eventually gets dissolved in the divine, because this is the inevitable conclusion of this truth. And the third, even bolder conception is that not only God is within, not only God is all around, but also all is God. This is very bold. Atme vabhud vijanata. Now this is very difficult for human mind to conceive. So we can put it like this, that all is God, but it's God in the becoming. Each particle is God in the becoming. So not only is he inside, he is constantly becoming. That's why we see in the Gita these three layers, Purushottama, the Akshar and the Sharobhav. So this constant becoming is nothing else but the divine expressing himself, bringing out new forms for manifestation, taking away what is no more necessary. And that's the tussle in creation, the evolutionary struggle, because God is perpetually becoming. So he is moving toward the future. And there are forms which are not ready to move towards the future. And therefore they inevitably collapse. There are forms that collapse. Consciousness cannot be destroyed. Energy cannot be destroyed. So he's constantly moving forward, because in the becoming itself there is the divine. He's flowing in it, he's flowing with it, and every particle is pregnant with possibility, divine possibility. So this was another bold conception that they made. So this spirituality, as Sri Aurobindo says, is the master key of India. If we want to understand India, we have to really go to its original spiritual sense with which the Indian thought saw and conceived this world. So this world as the Leela of the divine who is constantly bringing out new forms. And then we see that there are some other things that came into play, some other words, thoughts, and we'll just speak a little bit about that. Then came the idea of Maya. So what is Maya? Maya is nothing but that power which gives finite forms to the infinite. That's all that Maya means. Later on, some people picked it up and said form is illusion, but form and formless are all the time coexisting. Love exists in a formless state, but it takes a form. Personalized, individualized. Bliss exists in an impersonal, universal state, but it takes a personalized form. And these forms must become better and better. If you really look at life, can we say that a worm doesn't have love? It has love. It has the most elementary, rudimentary form of love. Can we say stones don't have love? They have love. That's what the power that binds the atoms together. So when we look at it like that, systems of worlds, at each level, the same forces are manifesting. But through evolution, they become better and better. Forms become more and more capable. Animals also express love. But in human beings, love takes a humanized turn. And as we grow, the same power, Shivinda puts it beautifully in Savitri, all our earth starts from the mud and ends in the sky. And love that was once an animal's wants, then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, then an ardent comradeship in the mind becomes a spiritual wide yearning space. So it is how they saw that forms were dwelling places of the Lord. Who can conceive such a vast way of looking at what today we call as temples, churches, gurudwaras and mosques? This is the temple. Each cell is a temple. Mother takes it to that extent. Each cell is a temple of the Lord. And from there sprang ways of life. Because if this body is the temple, so what do we do with the temple? We keep it clean. We don't fill it with alcohol and we don't, so if this is the temple, Manushi Tanu Ashritam, as the Gita says, there are ways of life that sprang from this thought. And those ways of life which were consistent with this profound truth, that was called as dharma. So dharma is something very interesting. Sanatana dharma. So one is, dharma has three connotations. This is the second beautiful aspect of Indian thought. One, dharma. What is it that holds creation? So often I ask people, what do you feel is your true identity? Recently people were saying, there is always this struggle for identity. But what identity? Outer identity. I wear a certain kind of dress. I eat a certain kind of food. I have a certain outer way of life. Therefore, I must have a separate state. But Indian thought never conceived that as an identity. That is an instrument. What is the identity? Identity is the deep spiritual self. Brahman, divine. Call it whatever, it doesn't matter. Ekam sad vipra bahuta vadanti. So, first aspect of dharma is dharan. What holds this creation? The moment I say that, well, creation is somehow, it is desire that is expressing at creation, then I am saying in a sense that the dharma is that there is desire at the root of creation. That is how many understand. That's how many people live their life, just to fulfill their desires. Why? Because if desire is at the root of creation, it is but natural. But Indian thought says delight is at the root of creation. Anandam Brahmeti. But this, it does not negate the other layers. It only says come higher and higher, deeper and deeper, then you will see the original cause. So we can take an example, but first that little story where this is beautifully described. The disciple goes to the guru and says, tell me about Brahman or that highest knowledge. Disciples, the guru says, you think, you reflect, meditate. Nothing can be taught. All is inside you. You reflect and come out with your answer. So after some time, the disciple says, oh, I have realized. Annam Brahmeti. Matter is Brahman. So the guru does not say nonsense. He says, okay. Kindergarten cleared. Reflect more. Now for the primary section. He comes back and says, after 1 year of meditation, he says, Pranam Brahmeti. This world is moved by a life energy. So he says, okay, good. At least we have reached from matter to energy. One step forward. You have cleared your primary. Come back for higher secondary. So he goes back and says, Mano Brahmeti. It is thought. So everything is a thought. You look at the mountain, it's a thought of God. You look at the river, it's a thought of God. So he starts seeing things like that. So he says that there is a thought which has gone in creation. It is something like, I think, therefore I am. So he says, okay, higher secondary gone, but now you have to go to the next level. Do your graduation and post-graduation. He comes back after some time and says, Vijnanam Brahmeti. Behind all these thoughts and ideas, which are like rays of the sun, there is a still greater reality, which has arranged them in space and time. These are not chaotic thoughts. So these thoughts are ordered. See, that's how the supermind is described. It arranges different forces which are emerging out of it. It puts them in order through the power of Rit Chit. That is the way things should be arranged. So that's how it is. Satyamev Jayate Nanritam. Rit is when things are arranged according to the law of truth. Unrit is when they are disturbed. They are not in accordance with the law of truth. So there is a constant reshuffling going on. So why it happens, that's a different story altogether. We can touch upon that. So Vijnanam Brahmeti, he says, well, you have cleared all your levels, but I can't give you certificate. You have to come up with one more answer. So he reflects and then he comes and says, Anandam Brahmeti. Raso Vaisaha. It's all an unfolding of Ananda. You see, if you look at an ocean, so we may say, why is the ocean forming waves? So we can explain it from the laws of physics. Then you can still go further and say, no, there is the energy transaction which is taking place. Then you go deeper and enter into a little bit nonsensible consciousness aspect and speak of it as thought, idea, conception. You go still further and say it's not just this ocean, but ocean connected with the mountain, the river, the air, and you enter into that Vijnan aspect. And then you say ultimately ocean, for its own delight, it is unfolding. Why should there be a cause? So this unfolding of the delight in creation is the original truth. But then the Indian thought says, to reach this delight, there are gradations of this, and there are actions and activities which take us away from the delight, and we slip towards what modern science would call as depression. You see, it's very interesting. You will find answer to everything there if you really reflect upon it. For instance, the very first sloka of the Isha Upanishad says, Isha Vasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Tena tyaktena bhunjita magridaya kasya svidhanam. Now you see, it says this gives the secret of delight. Secret of delight is renunciation. Sounds very strange because we are taught to possess, then I'll have joy. It says yes, if you possess, you will have pleasure. And it will invariably lead to pain, which is a blessing. Otherwise, you thought this pleasure is delight. So pleasure is snatched away. You have pain. So you seek a greater pleasure. Till you realize, no, not pleasure. So you graduate into the joy. Then one graduates or post-graduates into felicity. Then you go still further and ultimately you discover the delight. So we can find just on this phrase so many answers. Magrida kasisvidhanam. Why do you want to possess something as if it is your own? It all belongs to the Lord. So delight, to have that delight, we must grow vast. And we grow vast when we discover this one which is behind everything. So dharma and adharma had nothing to do with external activities. They had to do with the state of consciousness which is within it. How can Duryodhana's actions be adharma and Bhima's dharma? That would be the question that modern mind raises. In fact, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari raised this question. That look at Bhima, he killed 100 sons. And she says, Gandhari says, Bhim, you could have left at least one. And Bhima's answer, even if you had 200, I would kill them all. Sounds very strange. But Bhima knows that every son of Gandhari of this kind, he would stand for a dharma and he has to be removed. So it was based on a different kind of logic that this world must be saved. Sri Aurobindo says that Krishna saved India through the battle of Kurukshetra. So while ahimsa is paramo dharma, leave aside about, defense. Paramo, the ultimate, highest dharma. But when you are having a passage, you have to understand that there is a struggle between light and darkness. Darkness is also divine in the past. What we call today's darkness was necessary at a stage of evolution. There was a stage when desire and life governed by desire was necessary. There were tribes. They lived by like that. But the same thing today, supposing we say that we want to break the world into small tribes, some people do believe it. So what we are doing, we are going towards retrogression. It is like Sri Aurobindo says that it is true that anarchy is the first state and will be the last state of this creation. That is the divine anarchy, where each one discovered the divine within. But if you practice it in the middle, it will straight away lead to the devil's den. So this is how the Indian conception of dharma and adharma went. That there is constantly a struggle between this manifestation of the divine, the progressive march of mankind. The Gita puts it very beautifully, Lok Sangraharth, which is marching towards a great consummation. Shri Krishna doesn't say what is that consummation. He decided that I'll come back as Sri Aurobindo and reveal it. It was too premature on the battlefield of Kurukshetra to give all that jnana. It was not necessary for Arjuna's understanding. That question humanity will raise later, and so Shri Krishna comes as Sri Aurobindo and reveals this truth. So mankind is moving. So there is this sense of constant progression and evolution. See, evolution is there in India, both evolution of forms as well as evolution of consciousness. So the evolution of consciousness is there in Vedanta, that you go through several lives, and at the end of the certain lives, your soul has evolved enough to realize that Soham Asmi, that I am that, I am portion of the divine. What about the forms? See, Tantra says after so many forms, transiting through so many forms, you get a human form in which you can realize the divine. So there is a mystery of the form. It's not random. Why can't the animal realize the divine? Why is it given to man? So this is where we have the beauty of the form. The same thing we see in the story of Dashavatar. So it saw evolution as a twofold process. One was the inner growth and the second was the outer growth. But this entails a struggle, because all growth, evolution entails a struggle between forces that pull us backward and forces that carry us ascending order of light. So in Indian thought you will find several places this idea of struggle between the forces of light and darkness. It is there scattered in different religions. For instance, Zoroastrianism, they speak about our Mazda. But in Indian thought, it is brought up in its fullness. And light and darkness have nothing to do with outer, neither skin color nor the way your nose is placed and the language you speak. It is about inner state. So first, the Arya fights within and becomes Swarat. Then he wants to extend this empire of the divine into the world, and that's where he becomes Samrat. Now this extension is, see how everything was based on this one truth. So this extension was not an expansion. It was an extension of dharma. Now I'll give an example. So whenever a king in ancient times went to what would appear as expand his Rajya, what was it called? It was called as Ashwamedha Yagya. So we have this third beautiful conception other than dharma, which is Yagya. So Yagya is to purify and refine. So wherever he went, this king, he brought in the rule of dharma. That's what we see with Rama conquering Lanka. But he's not saying, okay, now everybody will pay tax to Ayodhya. He doesn't say that. He says, Vibhishan, you are the best person to rule this place. You become the king. Or in Kishkindha, he doesn't say, okay, now I rule over the monkey world. Monkey world will pay taxes to me. And all its resources I will use or misuse. He doesn't say that. He says, Sugriv, you become the king of Kishkindha. And then he comes back to Ayodhya. See, this is the beauty. It is an extension of dharma for which he labors. And not for an ostentatious empire to amass wealth. This is the difference. So this conception of yagya means everything has to be purified, uplifted. Because yagya means fire. Everything must be purified. And this conception of yagya went to what extent? Actually in Indian thought, yagya is the process and yoga is the result. Yoga is not a method and yagya is not a method. So any energy, if you refine and purify, from the most material movements through the most inmost movement, you will touch the divine. Because it all comes from the divine. Any activity, any movement. There is a line in Savitri, our smallest parts have room for deepest needs. Each part in us desires its absolute. everything. But keep refining, keep purifying. And that's what evolution is about. What is happening to all the energies as new forms emerge and as we grow, even in humanity, there is stratification. So they saw this evolutionary, because of evolutionary progression, there were stratifications, hierarchies. Whether we like it or not, hierarchies exist in nature. Even in one species it exists. But this hierarchy was not based on wealth and position. See, hierarchy exists even where people say that we don't believe in hierarchy, but you believe in hierarchy. But you only believe that somebody coming out of a Mercedes car is a big man. Or somebody who has Z plus security is a big man. That was not the hierarchy of Indian thought. The hierarchy was based on the state of consciousness. One who had wisdom was placed on top. One who had not the wisdom but who was ready to guard truth and wisdom was placed next. So this is how the hierarchy was created. And above them all was the yogi, the rishi. So they made use of everything. So we have these Chatur Varna emerging out of that. And then there was the conception of Chatur, not only Varna, but Varnashram and the 4 stages of life. It's something amazing conception. And if we understand even this, like for a child, so every stage has its own dharma. See, dharma was so beautiful. It was not like every child is supposed to sit and start, learning the Vedas. There were special places for that. But the dharma of the child was to learn to focus all his energy in higher and higher pursuit. So that was brahmacharya. He has to learn how to focus his energies towards higher and higher things. And start from the lower and higher. Be it Shastra Vidya, be it Shastra Vidya, be it anything, sciences, physics, chemistry, so that he goes deeper and deeper into a subject till he discovers that greater reality. This power to concentrate on, focus everything on that one pursuit, so much so that you become unmindful of everything else, like Arjun. That is brahmacharya. It is not just about celibacy. Obviously, children, you don't teach that. But this ability to focus all your energies onto one pursuit. So this was the first stage. After that, you must experience life. Grahastha. Graha, hold. So you become a householder. Why it is necessary? Because unless you have grappled with the forces of life, with the energies of the world, borne their impact, returned what you have to return, gave something to the world, served it as a strong person. There is a beautiful line in Savitri. After you have served this great divided world, after we have served this great divided world, God's bliss and oneness are our inborn right. So it was never a world shunning. They allowed it because Indian thought allowed everything. So sannyasi was also there because, if you want to take an extreme effort to realize the one individually, it is okay. But that was not the purpose. So you were a grahast in the second stage. After you had grappled with the world and not succumbed and not developed nirasha and vairagya, then you were qualified for the next stage. That was vanaprastha, where you start seeking greater wisdom. And then there was this consummation into moksha. There was no moksha for somebody who has run away from life. So what is moksha? Again, we see this word used in Indian thought so much. Moksha is nothing to do with cutting the cycles of birth and death. That's a later thought. But in the original conception, moksha literally meant freedom from ignorance. What is ignorance? It defined it like this. Ignorance is that I think I am the body, identified with the body. Ignorance is that I am nothing but a desired self and I am meant to fulfill my desires. Ignorance is to believe that my identity is what is stamped from my birth and given on my birth certificate. Ignorance is to believe that I am my thoughts and opinions and viewpoints. So what is knowledge? Knowledge is to discover this base reality, Esha Dharma Sanatana, this eternal reality which is within each element of creation, and then to live to manifest it in the progressive march of mankind. This was the goal they placed before all of us. So when we look at Indian thought, so moksha was freedom from ignorance. And if we led a life of dharma, it led us towards moksha, inevitably. We didn't have to go to a forest to discover moksha. If we led a life of grahast, but based on dharma. If we led a life of seeker, seeker has his own dharma. So that's how it is described. So dharma was not a do's and don'ts. Dharma was a very vast, and for everything there was a dharma. There was a dharma of politics. There is a dharma of the warrior. There is a dharma of the householder. There is a dharma of, even objects. Snake has its own dharma. Tiger is its own dharma. Tiger is following its dharma. So we don't call him a bad tiger as long as he is following his dharma. But if he becomes a man-eater, then he is transgressing a boundary of nature which nature has created. See, nature has created these jungly jeev in such a way that they spontaneously stay away from human beings. It's nature's mechanism. They look into human eyes and they feel stay away. So they will not attack unless you threaten them. So if you threaten them and they attack you, it is understandable. Otherwise, this nature's ways, there is a magic circle. Just as around us there is a magic circle which doesn't allow us to go beyond into the territory of the gods. So this is how Indian thought conceived. And then we have this system of worlds and gods. So what are these gods? Gods are cosmic managers. For everything there is a god. Who is the god? Well, if you have a universe running, cosmos running, you just can't have somebody sitting out there and arbitrarily doing things. He appoints a manager first, who is going to run the cosmos. So he is beyond cosmos and yet he is here. So, but the one who manages is Kala, time. And who is sitting on top of the Kala? Mahakali. I like that word more than Mahakal. It's my personal. She is the one whose steps will determine the rhythms of time. All the gods have to obey her. But she is dancing on whose breast? Shiva. So you see the hierarchy. There is the Brahman, Shiva, Shivatva, eternal. And then there is the dance of Kali, who is changing time. And all the gods have to obey her. So all the gods are cosmic managers. They receive that impulsion of the divine from above and act according to that. And the great gods receive it correctly. But the lesser gods, as they send more and more, they start, it's like when electrical energy comes from the original, let's say the nuclear station. By the time it reaches the local transformer, there is a loss. We all know that. And the whole effort is how to minimize this loss. So at each level of transformers, gods, there is a loss of energy, there is a distortion, and what happens is the end result, which is a distorted world. That's why the mother had to work even on the gods, because they are in the transmission that is getting distorted. The solution is that man, who himself is a god, must come in direct contact with the Supreme. Now that's a different thought, but basically the gods, can't do away with the gods. Whether we like them or not, they are there. The only way to do away is like, okay, I want to have a direct connection with the Supreme. That is given to man. But then you can't just say they don't exist. This is what people did, that they are pagans and they destroyed the gods. What happened in the result? You created the division between earth and the beyond. There was God sitting up in heaven and there is this nature, which remained an inexplicable phenomenon. So that's why the gods. And the third is the system of worlds. So in Indian thought, it's not just one world. It sounds very nice. One world, one people. Too naive, too childish. Even it is a wishful thinking. There are many worlds, system of worlds. And each of these worlds have not just energies, but beings, domains, powers, influences. This is too vast a subject. And they call this lok. 7 loks beyond the material and 7 below the material world, dipping toward the utter inconscient darkness and higher. And then Indian thought saw this world emerging from above downwards. You see, these things are amazing in the sense with great potential to transform our way of life. So what does it mean? The Gita puts it as Ashwatha tree. The roots of creation are above. Now, people don't understand that's why. That what does it mean? They must have a little imagination that what is meant by roots of creation, it draws sustenance from above. And I often give this example of a flower or a tree. So ordinarily we will say that the roots of the tree are below. But is it not true that the tree is coming up drawn by the sun? That's where its original replica is. That's why Sri Aurobindo says you can't discover the secret of the lotus by analyzing the mud. You must go and discover the heavenly archetype of the lotus. The tree is drawn toward that original idea. That's why a particular seed grows into a certain tree. So the roots are above, where there is the original blueprint. And upon earth, the manifestation is taking place. So this is the whole story of, this is called a top-down view of creation. It has tremendous possibilities in terms of our everyday life, but I am not touching upon that. So this is how they conceived this world. And finally, there are many other aspects, but just to very briefly to touch upon it, they saw life. The soul of man, Sri Aurobindo describes, is a battle. It's a battlefield. They saw this as Kurukshetra. Before it can become the Leela Kshetra, the Krida Kshetra of the divine. It's meant to become the Krida Kshetra, the Kridangan, the play of the divine. But before that, there is Kurukshetra. So the soul of man, as it advances, it has to battle against visible and invisible opponents. Visible because the same forces take human forms and human shape to thwart the plan. So always you will find this in Indian thought, this sense of standing up for what is right and true. But this right and true is not an ideology. This right and true is the divine manifestation. It has nothing to do with I stand for what I believe in my conception. It's not about belief and conception, but what is really true. And what is true even in the unfolding. So the soul of man is a battle in which there are powers that help and powers that thwart. So we constantly see reference to the Devas and the Asuras. So just like there are forces that help us advance, there are forces that thwart the advance. See, that's how Sri Aurobindo put all his spiritual force behind the alleys. Because he saw that Hitler is not just a menacing human being. He is a being of falsehood. He saw it. Now, somebody else will say, what's wrong? He is trying to just, expand his empire. Nations don't exist. See, this is the problem of nations don't exist theory, which takes the round. All is one family. When nations don't exist, if right now we do it, a time will come when each nation will be a manifestation of the one world unity. But if you do it now, you are giving a great chance to Hitlers, and they are all around. So let's not talk about it. So everything moves with a principle of graduality. The evolution is progressive. It is in terms of time. Time is the cosmic manager. You have to allow time. You have to wait for the right moment. For everything, there was a right time, there was a right place and a right way to do it. And that was called the Shastra. Shastra was to know. Everything was fine in creation. You have a wrestling match where you are going to have kill or get killed. Do it in the WWF ring. It's okay. You are being paid money for this. That's the place. But if you do it on the street, you are a ruffian. So everything has its time and place and rhythm. That's what becomes the Shastra. And this Shastra is within us for everything. You want to shoot an arrow, or in today's context, you want to shoot a gun. This is the Shastra. This is the right way of doing it. This is the right method, right procedure. When first time I fired a gun during the training, military training. So you have to fire. What a recoil. I literally felt pain. So he told me, this is not the way, doctor. Achhe se lagao. Firmly. I put it lightly. I thought it's a style. You put it here. And the recoil made me aware, this is not the way to do it. So for everything there is a Shastra. There is a Shastra behind each branch of science, and arts and philosophy. So there were 64 kinds of Shastras, which once upon a time existed in India for everything. So this is what I meant. It's a vast cathedral, and behind all of it was the one reality, who is transcendent, supreme. It transcends everything. It transcends all conceptions, so it is neti neti. It transcends all belief systems, so it is neti neti. But it is also immanent in everything, so it is iti iti. Everything is God. At the same time, God is beyond everything. So this conception of reality, that it's transcendent, at the same time immanent, and also it is cosmic. These were the three levels at which Indian thought saw that one reality. Immanent, it is in everything. Cosmic, it surrounds everything. And transcendent, it is beyond the individual and the cosmos. And any conception we may have of him will be at best is scaffolding. It's okay because you have to move further. But if you think that that conception is the divine, then you are making a mistake. And finally, they gave a path to realize this triple divine, if I may use the word. That is yoga. So this was one of the greatest gifts of India, that don't take it as a belief system. You don't have to believe in God. You have to have faith, which is different. Belief is a mental thing. Yes, I believe God exists. Faith means there is the divine and I can arrive. I can become one because He is the source. This is one of the greatest truths, that I can become one with the source, one with the Creator. And this is how the purpose of life was seen, as ultimately becoming one with the divine and manifesting Him, or it or her, call it whatever, or that, in life and mind and body and speech and feelings and will, impulsions, and in the very body itself. I think I'll stop here. If there are some questions, I'll be happy. I think I've exceeded the limit, but well, you can't compress the foundations in. I have not touched upon the literature, not the creative genius, because as I said, the time is very short. On Ramayana, Mahabharata, each of these Kalidas works and this, the language, Sanskrit, its beauty, but that's entering into all the details. Yes, please.
Thanks for coming, Alok, to wisdom. You are sharing your wisdom with us. It's very inspiring. You said gods are cosmic managers. In that case, we are cosmic consumers. My question is, when we were reading Mother, we often read Mother at the foundation of this. And when I came back, I said I have preference to read the Supramato Maharshaya. And I felt like maybe I'm thinking that this all other four aspects of Manas are good, but we need Supramato Maharshaya. So if I bypass the gods, you said that we have access to the Supreme. Do you think this cosmic managers will help us? Or?
Okay, this is a very good question. But first, let me say it's very unfortunate that we have become cosmic consumers. I like that term and quite original. But that's very unfortunate because even animals are not cosmic consumers. Because they also do some good to earth, knowingly, unknowingly. Look at the way flowers pollinate and animals, even, especially a cow. Everything of the cow helps this world. So, and many animals, all of them have their own role to play in the vast cosmic chain. But human beings, yes, have become like cosmic consumers. But that is not our truth. Sri Aurobindo says it's even there in the Vedas. Man is a god, but he has fallen from that status. And why? Because he has to learn the lesson that comes through fall, the lesson of humility, which is the first requirement to become one with the Supreme. There's a beautiful story in one of the Upanishads, I forget the name, when, all the animals go to Brahma, the creator, and say, what is this? You have made man as the topmost, but he has neither the swiftness of the deer, nor the strength of the tiger, nor the elegance of the lion. And what is this fellow? You have made him the topmost fellow in the food chain. He's only creating chaos. He said, no, there is something in man because of which I have made him the top. So animals say, what is it? They say, because he has buddhi, the capacity to reflect and change himself. This is something given to man, buddhi, the discerning intellect. Otherwise, intelligence is there in every species, which is required for its own looking after. So man can consciously grow. So they jaw drop and they start going. Then one of them says, wait, I have one more question to ask him. So they go back. So Brahma says, what now? So he says, what if man does not use it? So he says, in that case, he is worse than an animal. But if he uses it rightly, then he can become greater than the gods. So you see, when we bypass the gods, as is there even in the Upanishad, you will see that they bypass the gods. They even bypass. They say that the Mundaka Upanishad says that the three Vedas, for instance, are the subject of inferior knowledge. Of course, they are referring to ritualistic understanding of the Vedas, not the essence of the Vedas. Who is the real object of knowledge? Higher knowledge says that Purusha in the golden sheath. So at every time they have spoken about direct contact with the Supreme. Even the Gita speaks about that. It says that, if you seek the heavens and even if you pray to the gods, ultimately you'll come to me and I'll grant. But you can directly have access to me. This there, both routes were open to Indian gods, to Indian thought. So to an extent, the gods understand that these fellows have been given that access pass through which you can directly enter Auroville, and the person at the gate will not ask you. He knows you. But if I come, they will stop my vehicle and ask me. So he is like the cosmic god. He's doing his function. He's not doing something wrong. It happened, no? Last time when I was coming for a talk in Savitri Bhavan, so I kept telling him, see, madam has invited me. He says, ultimately I called up Ram Narayanji. Ram Narayanji is trying to tell, please let him come. No, sir, we have not, and we don't have any information. So, but he's doing his job. You can't blame him for it. So you see, ultimately he will let you go. That's what we see in the Vedas, the colloquy between Indra and Agastya, where Agastya says, please let me go. You have helped me reach here. Why aren't you letting me go? So Indra says, no, I'll send you all the this and that and lures. So they have their role to play, and the mother says 3 levels you are tested. One is forces of nature, cosmic nature. Then there are the adverse and the hostile forces, which are the dark worlds. And then there are spiritual forces, which lure us into different bypaths, temporary gifts, some siddhis, and some higher plane. So, well, they try to do their job. But they do recognize, that is the difference between the gods and the titans. Titans don't recognize the supreme divine. So they will give a fight. If when we go sheltered with the mother, as you said, Supreme Mahashakti, they will not let you go just like that. But the victory will be of the Divine Mother. We have to allow ourselves to be held in her hands. Not pop into the Titan's lap or say, oh, you are so ferocious. When he appears so ferocious, look back and say, I am with the Divine Mother. What is there? She will win the victory, but it will be a battle. But when the gods see that we are being carried by the Divine Mother, they'll say, okay, Tata, okay, fine, it's fine. I do that every time I cross the Ganpati temple in near the ashram. I say, hi, good. They are like our friends because they are helping this creation. So that's how one has to look at them. And that's why the mother had worked on the gods, that they too must understand that this is a new thing which is being done, and they must collaborate. So that's a whole history of the ashram where she called the gods, made Durga surrender, and even, asked all of them, will you collaborate in this new process? And Shiva said, I'll break the ego of people because I am good at that. And mothers started feeling her body is dissolving. All the cells are scattering. And she went to Sri Aurobindo. What is happening, this funny feeling? So Sri Aurobindo says, not now. And the whole action stopped. Can you imagine the power of Sri Aurobindo's word? Shiva's action was stalled. She says, after 40 years this happened, because that time it would have been premature. And then she says, but Shiva had granted what I had asked for. But Krishna, he accepted to fuse with the human body. Other gods said, we will help. So Ganesha brought money, but later on after 10 years he couldn't get more money. So Mother asked, what happened to your promise? He said, only Indians, they listen to me. So I try to poke them in their pockets, they don't respond. What can I do? But Indians, they are, we understand giving money for anything which is spiritual. Outside, very difficult. They give for this foundation which is trying to expand the empire of the mind. So this was the problem. All the gods tried to help. So now they know, even nature knows that there is a new creation. So when we take shelter in her arms, The Titans, those who are not dissolved, two of them are dissolved, third is also dissolved. The dissolved means agreed to convert. And the fourth, I believe that, actually he said that I'll give a tough fight, but I'll surrender. I know that ultimately. Yeah. So now they will, but particularly falsehood, because it's the last one. It will try every which way, but shelter in our arms and one is safe. But the gods, they are nice guys. They are right on very friendly terms. Actually, they are very friendly. And when they see that you are genuine and you are sheltered by the Divine Mother, they too don't. If anything, they will help you. You are going on an errand, they will give something that they have to give. Like in Savitri, it is described in Heavens of the Ideal. So, Ashapati, when he reaches there are all these gods, the radiant children of paradise. So, eternity, sorry, not paradise. So, what they do is they offer him an insignia and a flower as a symbol that now, we are friends. So, wherever there is a requirement, you can show that, this God is also with me. So, better be careful. But Ashapati doesn't stop there and goes further. But for us, it's very simple that we belong to her, Ma. All of them bow down before the Supreme Ma Shakti, Adi Shakti. They know she is their origin. The Asuras do not know. And they are the fellows to be watched over. You should not worry about the gods. No. I have all the time. I have taken off from, but I don't know whether people have time or not. I'm fine.
You were talking about a Guru and Siddhan story.
Yes.
Asking who is Brahman. Go and find.
The reality which is behind. Yes.
So outer surface and buddhi, mana, and then it goes.
Vijnana and then Ananda.
Finally, he comes to Ananda. Anandam is Brahman.
Yes. All of these are Brahman. But the ultimate is the Anandam Brahmeti sitting behind you. No, okay, that story, sorry. So, the beauty is something very interesting. It doesn't deny, it says, Annam Brahmeti. He says, okay, but go further. Then he says, Pranam Brahmeti. Okay, he doesn't deny. So, as I said, is this place Savitri Bhavan? Yes, it is. But Savitri Bhavan is not only this hall or all the halls. Savitri Bhavan is an idea. Now, is idea Savitri Bhavan? No. There is something still greater. So when you go ultimately, and to tell you very frankly, it is also a very practical thing. How to know that you belong to a certain place? I use this simple test. Whether it be a job, people go for aptitude, no? So whether it's a job or whether it's a place. So I say, do you feel joy? Equally in company. Do you feel joy? Now this joy, not a surface pleasure which lasts for 2 days. Deep inner joy is a sign. So if you are happy in a place in general, so you have touched something of the core. Ananda expressing itself through this particular space. It's everywhere, in every place, to each his own, booty. Of course, that joy is not Ananda, but it's an indicator. Similarly, in an activity, because ultimately the origin is that. Why do we do things? We do it because there is ultimately that Ananda that emerges from inside, which no amount of money can compensate. I may be working in a multinational firm and getting a lot of money, but if I am not happy, would I do it for long? I won't. So, of course, once again, happiness is not Ananda. But at least in human frame, it is the little indicator of Ananda.
Yeah, my question is to some extent answered on the first question. Is that everything is divine, even the gods are also divine, and whether we accept it or not, recognize it or not, they are there. And in this yoga of transformation, my question is, what is their role?
Okay, very good. So I was going to just continue, and since Bhaskar Bhai just did, probably prompted by Ananda. No, I'm just so forms are also Brahman. Brahman has become the form. The purpose of form is to become an instrument of the formless. So the two go together. Formless seeks forms to express itself. See, a mother feels love in her heart. But when she cooks a meal for the child, this love is multiplied. It changes into bliss because she feels that love. But when she makes it, when she takes care of the child, that love becomes expressed. So then there can be distorted expressions also of the same truth. So form, this is a form, an act. No, when you put form is not just physical form. Or when you write a little note. These are forms. So all this universe, forms are there to express that reality which is formless. That's why Kabir says, Saat samand ki masi karo, lekhani sab ban rai, dharti to kagat karo, hari kund likhana jai. He says that if you make ink out of the 7 oceans and all the trees into a pen, and this entire earth as a paper, you can't write all the infinite qualities of Hari, the indwelling universal. You can't write it but they are meant to express. Each aspect of each form is a thought of God. As I said, when you look at the mountains, so that's how we saw these things, that earth's forms were the divine document. When you look at a river, each river has why Ganga is so sacred, and then Yamuna with its chapal chal, and Saraswati which is hidden within each of them. So in every river there is a Godhead, in the mountains there is a Godhead, in the forest. So everything, if you look at it that way, forms, they express something of this divine reality. Now that's what is the utility of form, whether it be a physical form or whether it be a mental. By mental form I mean institution. Institutions are meant to express the divine reality. They are not meant to express, at least that's what they are meant to be. And for instance, Auroville, it's meant to express that reality which has been of the future of that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have brought forth. It's not a mental intellectual institution. There are many mental intellectual institutions. But then intellectual mental activities are not denied because they too are Brahman. But they must become ways and means to express that deeper reality. But they can equally become ways and means to block the manifestation of that deeper reality. That's when dharma and adharma come into play. So all the forms, even gesture and posture. So that's why dharma had these 3 layers. We spoke of the 2, the base and the inner. But these are the most external aspects of dharma. For instance, we say namaste. We don't say hi. Nothing wrong with hi. But hi when we do this way, then next is bye. But when we do namaste, it's I bow to the divine presence in you. We all know that. When somebody dies, we don't say dead person. So we do namaste to Shiva. Why? Because it held Shiva inside. And it is taking time for it. So we do pranam to the dead body. Sounds very strange. Because dead body is dead body. What is there to do namaste, scientifically speaking? So for us, everything is immanent with that. And therefore, all the outer activities were built around this understanding. You must have seen when, there is an Indian show, many Indian shows unfortunately have become a parody of the American show. One of them is Indian Idol. And then you have the American Idol. Now what happens when Indian dancer goes to stage or an Indian singer, some of them, you will see, especially dancers, they touch the stage and do pranam. Why do they do it? This is the dharma which is inbuilt. It's a gesture, most outward gesture. It's an understanding that this dharti is going to now bear the dance that I am going to undertake. So it's a living reality. And I seek its support to do that. So you treat things as a living reality. Everything is a living reality. It's not something which is dead. For the Indian conception, there is nothing like dead. Dead is what? That which is in ignorance. It's an inner state. But forms, just because it has a form, it is not dead. So there are many forms which live in the realm of ignorance, which is called as mrityu. Mrityulok, martyalok. And one who escapes the snare of ignorance becomes amratva, amartya or amratva. So that's how we looked at it. Not animate and inanimate. Because everything is animated with the divine presence. That's why you can pick up a stone and worship it and realize the divine from it. So forms are meant to be instrument of the divine reality and they should be treated as such. It's a great importance because all this world is a manifestation. You can't manifest anything without forms. He is formless. The divine is a being, but formless. Being in the sense that he is conscious of himself. He's a being, but he needs forms to express. Otherwise, there would be no world. So every form, whether institution, which is a form, institution could be marriage, institution could be a school, institution could be, should express this deeper reality. Or outer gestures, postures. So when you meet the Guru, we bow down to the feet. Mother was asked, why do we bow to the feet? She said, because the feet is through which the power goes out. And if you see, it is so logical, you receive from above, and as that Shakti comes down through the feet, it goes. So when you bow down to the feet of the Master, you receive that power. Blessing. Not everybody is supposed to bless anyone and everyone. Blessing. So you're allowing this power to be something of yours to be shared by those who are doing pranam to you. So all this was inbuilt. Every form, before eating, to remember the divine, that may this food build in me strength and energy to do the right and be governed by the light. These many forms. Every form was a means to express. Marriage around the fire, 7 times, means on all the planes we unite, but not around ego, not around the life of mutual satisfaction, desire or pleasure, but around the common aspiration. That's what marriage is about. That we'll keep the aspiration in the center. Not that, okay, we have got married, let's go to now Hong Kong and or US, earn a lot of money, build a big place. That was never an ideal of marriage. Okay. Yes, please.
So, Alok, you spoke about, you gave 2 examples of when Ram went to Kishkinda and then to Lanka, and then he established an extension of Dharma. And then we also see what happened in Kurukshetra. Although on surface it looks like a lot of Hinsa,
Yeah.
at the deeper level it's completely something else. So, my thing is that if humans are supposed to be potentially divine, when we look around, it seems that today whatever a human being touches, it's from a place of exploitation, to kind of get something to exploit. So is it that the buddhi element that you talked about, that is kind of not being utilized or
Yes.
in the wrong direction?
So, beautiful question. So, we'll touch it on 3 levels. First, since we started with Rama and Krishna, so Kurukshetra, Hinsa. Now, Hinsa and Ahimsa are inner states. That's how we see in the Gita that Shri Krishna speaks of Ahimsa, Daya, all this as divine quality, Devi Sampada. So, you see, let's take an example. When somebody is trying to or doing something which is very consciously evil, and you hold the hand, you do it with a courage, a strength, a force. But when you want to harm somebody, that's where Hinsa comes in. Hinsa is where you want to harm for your own personal gratification. So it is the same act, but it becomes Hinsa or Ahimsa depending on the state of consciousness. That's about Hinsa. It's important because many people, misuse this. So when your inner being is seething with anger, that's why Sri Aurobindo discarded this entire idea of Gandhian Ahimsa. True Ahimsa is Buddha's. So, when you are seething with anger, but outwardly you are saying, no, I'll take the lathi on me and stand. This is dangerous because you will release soul forces which are very devastating in nature. So anyway, that's one part of the subject. The second is that when you see people exploiting and why they are doing it, well, they are doing it, one, because, as you rightly said, buddhi is the first thing to be extricated from this complex human nature. Not soul comes for those who are doing yoga. But buddhi and Sri Krishna, that's how he starts. And Sri Aurobindo also in the yoga of self-perfection, he starts with that. That the first thing, because it's the most easy. And buddhi to be extricated, it is right now involved in the mind. And it is at the mercy of the mind and the vital. And Sri Krishna gives a beautiful method. He says, in most human beings, this buddhi is Bahushakhanam. So it is driven by the 100-tongued desire. I want this, so people use buddhi. That's why it is called durbuddhi. How I'll get it? It doesn't matter, whatever be the means. I must get that. So this is called Bahushakhanam buddhi. The other is Vyavasaitmak, not Vyavasai that way, but a buddhi which is focused inward and upward. So there are two movements of buddhi. One is outward and downward, which is where the exploitation, misuse comes in, where man becomes worse than an animal. Because animals never do that. They live for their needs. Whereas if he turns it inward in pursuit of a deeper law, he doesn't act, a man with buddhi doesn't act impulsively. He wants to go within and seek a greater law. Or higher, what is the origin of this creation, this universe, this seeking? Then the buddhi turns upward and inward and it becomes illumined with a greater consciousness. Then of course comes the soul and the self. But buddhi is misused because it's the newborn faculty. It's not there in human beings. Human beings, in animals, animals have a mind. They have an intelligence, but buddhi is not there. It is uniquely human, but still, like all new things, right now it is at the mercy of the animal nature in us. So, first step is to extricate the buddhi, and it should be something which should be. But the way to do it is not, buddhi doesn't develop through books and all this. Buddhi is by turning it inward and upward. That's all. And for everything, for instance, children, when they do something, how to train the buddhi is to make them conscious. Why they are doing what they are doing. And for grown-ups also, why we are doing whatever we are doing. Okay. No, I'm okay, but I think... yeah.
Recently I came across what Sri Aurobindo said in Uttara speech. I ask only for strength to uplift this nation. I ask only to be allowed to live and work for these people whom I love and to whom I pray that I may devote my life. It's really inspiring. Recently, I was given a job or a project to help people to do farming, and I have around 10 to 15 people who are working with me from morning, and we are learning how to do farming. My question is, the Indianness, is it in conflict with the Aurovillianness? Because I'm an Aurovillian, primarily. I'm committed to it. But discovering my Indianness is in any way, it's going to hinder or it's going to help.
No, I always say this about ashram, Auroville. So as I said, Savitri Bhavan is in a larger setting of Auroville. So Auroville exists in the larger setting of India. See, so India has this base of Sanatana Dharma. That's why today we are having the festival of Auroville. And I do believe that if we go through Sri Aurobindo and the mother's writings, and particularly Sri Aurobindo, the entire Sanatana Dharma is the base. When we see his document about the 4 mission that he has come to do, Shri Krishna gave him the, Nirukta, and one of them is this, to restate the truths of the Sanatana Dharma in a new way. So India, by India I mean the Sanatana Dharma. And obviously when we are living in, Sri Aurobindo himself spoke about the law of the land. Now I'm touching from that angle also. So being an Aurovillian doesn't, I'm talking of if I am not only Indian or not Indian by passport, but I am operating within the setting of India. I can't drive on the road on the right hand and say, well, that's how I drive in my country. Isn't it so? I have to respect the law of the land. So there is something called I may not agree with it. I may strive to change it. I may say this is not done, and there are ways and means to address it. But I can't see, this is where the problem comes. Like today we have this Khalistani movement. We are separatists, we want to go our own way. That's not how any group of humanity will evolve. Why? Because then the next step will be tribes. Then the next step will be white tribes. There would be small little ghettos of people who will fight with others. Whereas the world must move forward. So nation soul is a part of the divine blessing. Sri Aurobindo speaks about the 3 strides of Vishnu. First is family, second is nation, third is the world unity. So the national context is important. And I think it's important to remember. So Auroville is an inner truth. And why only India? One day the whole world should become Auroville in its true sense, not by becoming a member of AVI International or Sri Aurobindo. I mean, it applies to everything. By institutionalizing, you can't do these things. It is by the living the spirit. And that spirit, there are many Indians who are not Indians. The mother said that, India has to be saved from Indians. So, I am equally vocal about all these things. But the spirit that gave birth to Auroville, if you live it wherever you are, then you are living in an inner Auroville. Like one mother said, the whole world should become an ashram of the Lord. Does it mean that we start converting people into thought of Sri Aurobindo? No, it doesn't mean that. Because there is something to be received when we are ready. But the essence of that thought, ultimately when we go back, we'll discover Sanatan Dharma. That's what Sri Aurobindo says. When India rises and expands, it means Sanatan Dharma rises and expands. So this always has to be kept in the background. That, the Sanatan Dharma, in the true sense, I'm not talking of its externalities which change, forms change, institutions change. We can't have Gurukul with children coming, shaved heads and choti, sporting a choti, putting tripund, certainly not. But the sense that it's not just a school, but a kul, I belong to the Guru. It's something very important. And I suppose that's the spirit in which all these things develop.